This episode of Holding the Line contains descriptions and discussions of sensitive topics and violence. Listener discretion is advised. Who are the men and women of law enforcement that you read about in the newspaper or you see news reports on TV who've been involved in a high profile incident when they're accused of being brutal or racist or something else? But who are they? Who are they behind the scenes? Who are they as people? What are their values? What is their family like? Where do they come from? Welcome to Holding the Line, a podcast about cops, courts, and crime. I'm here with my co-host, Sean Kennedy. And Sean, we have an interview today with Mark Wagner, career law enforcement officer in Wisconsin. Sean, what did you think?
It's amazing to meet people like Mark and know that there are hundreds of thousands of them defending us on a daily basis and all that they sacrifice. And what's so striking listening to Mark is he is not only a happy warrior about what he went through, but he had such perseverance. They turned his life inside out, one of these progressive prosecutors in Madison, Wisconsin, and they stood toe to toe with him and said, we can make this go away. You just have to tell them that you've done wrong and plead guilty to a lesser crime. And he said, jump in a lake. I'm going to face justice. And he was vindicated. But that takes a lot of fortitude, and he showed it.
I'm joined by Mark Wagner. Mark is a special agent with the Wisconsin Department of Justice. And as you'll soon learn, he recently went through the ordeal of a lifetime. And the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund was proud to support Mark through that ordeal. And he's on the other side. And so we're just pleased to be joined by Mark. Welcome.
Thank you, Jason. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So, Mark, I want to spend a few moments to help our listeners become acquainted with kind of who you are. So you're a native of Wisconsin. Is that right?
That's correct. I grew up in north of Milwaukee. At 19 years old, I joined the Milwaukee Police Department. I had a police aid program there that I joined and was sworn in as an officer when I was 21 years old. Started as a patrol officer. I was on the entry team for a narcotics entry team. I was on the bomb squad, the dive team. And I finished off my career at the Joint Terrorism Task Force with the FBI.
Okay. I know you're going to undersell it because you're like a humble Midwestern guy, right? But that's not an average police career. You obviously had earned the respect of your peers and your supervisors. And you're not just an average cop, right? You're like super cop.
I had a very blessed career. I was able to do a lot of good for a lot of people in everything I did.
Yeah.
And I was happy to do it. I loved the job. I still love the job. It's just kind of part of me.
And obviously you had a great career, but beyond your work in law enforcement as a public servant, 25 years in Milwaukee Police Department across, again, they don't just throw these types of roles that you had at anyone. So you obviously had a great reputation and, you actually donated your kidney to a work colleague of yours.
I did. It kind of chokes me up a little bit because I love the guy. But it was my partner when I was on the narcotics unit with Milwaukee. He had retired, and shortly thereafter, he needed a kidney. There was no hesitation at all. I went in to see if I was a match for him, and when the testing came back, I was a perfect match. And there wasn't even thinking twice. It's like he has young children, and I want him to be around for his children. There wasn't second guessing at all.
It's incredible. For the average person to just hear you talk about that and understand not only the generosity you have, the selflessness, and really it also highlights the relationships that people build in careers like law enforcement, where people that you work with and around are family, and you would do anything to help them, and you obviously lived that. So I mean, it's incredible. So after you retired from Milwaukee Police Department after 25 years, you start working for the Wisconsin Department of Justice. And what was the job?
I retired, and then I was hired on with the Division of Criminal Investigation, which is a subsection, an investigation portion of the Wisconsin Department of Justice. We're the state agency that investigates the officer-involved shootings. I was assigned to a narcotics unit where we did large-scale narcotics trafficking is what we investigated. But then we would be also tasked with any human trafficking that might come in or officer involved shootings that come in that have to be investigated, or any other high profile type cases, missing children that we would investigate, kidnapped children, or any high profile cases.
Okay, so you're doing real law enforcement. This is not like a cozy retirement job. You're still in that role. You're working on very important things, including chasing down fugitives and people that are really bad repeat offender type criminals who are dangerous people. Along that line, there came a time that there was an individual that had an arrest warrant that had been obtained for him. He was I don't think calling him a career criminal is stretching it at all, but a dangerous guy that there was reason to believe may be armed. And so your team and you were tasked with taking Mr. Wilson into custody pursuant to this warrant. Do I have all that right?
That is correct. I was part of a joint tactical team, which is our state tactical team at the time, and we were tasked to bring a subject into custody for an investigation that involved narcotics dealing, and he was responsible for an overdose death, which he sold fentanyl or heroin to an individual, ended up overdosing and dying from it. And he was also on probation. It was a long-term investigation on this subject involving state, local, and federal authorities. And it culminated to this day. They had tried taking him into custody before. He had fled on law enforcement before, hit a high speed pursuit with not only local, but the federal authorities, where they actually had a helicopter in the sky, and he was still able to get away. And during the briefing, it was brought up, he was a very dangerous individual. We had 3, 4 different plans that day in a way to try to get him in custody. We didn't want to necessarily take him inside of his residence because we were worried about a hostage situation with children and his wife. So we kind of wanted we call it an open air arrest, where either he's on foot or he's in his vehicle, where we can take him off most safe, the safest way possible.
And this is definitely not like a spontaneous thing where, like, in a lot of these cases, a police officer sees something and acts on it spontaneously, not knowing anything about the person that they're going to arrest or whatever. That was not this, right? You knew a lot about, and you and your whole team knew a lot about Mr. Wilson, and you had planned it, and you had intended that the arrest be made in as safe a way as possible, right? So you're actually trying to block him in so he can't get out. That's the whole idea, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct. Based on the fact of how dangerous fleeing has become now. So we attempt to get a vehicle in front of his vehicle and a vehicle in back of his vehicle, and he almost pinned the vehicle in with 2 larger vehicles in an attempt to stop his actions of what he's going to do next, or flee from the officers.
And so he's trying to get out of the block. He's spinning wheels, getting his car going forward and trying to get out of the block and get away. Also, you didn't mention it specifically, but I understand you had information that he may be armed with a firearm as well, and he certainly had a criminal history to support that. Um,
Correct.
so
I was a shield operator, which is a ballistic shield, and I'm first in the line to protect the other officers behind me. We go up in a team of 3 on one side of a vehicle. I'm a shield, and I have my handgun out in front of the shield as a shield operator. My partner's directly behind me with a rifle covering me, and then we have a third individual, which is our hands individual, who assist in breaking the rear window if needed, if we don't get compliance. And then we have other officers farther behind us as an arrest team if needed. So I get out of the car as soon as he was pinned in. He continuously moves or shifts from drive to reverse, trying to slam his vehicle out of the pin. Tires are squealing, engines revving, windows are tinted, and there's just billows of smoke now coming up from his rear tires as I'm approaching. As I'm approaching, I'm screaming to him, let's see your hands, announcing police, let's see your hands, let's see your hands. And I get up to the window with the shield, kind of squared off at the driver's side window, and I see Quadrant in his vehicle. I see his right hand kind of near the center console area, and Quadrant turns his head, looks at me as I'm screaming at him, turns away and is looking down, turns his head again, looking at me, turns his head looking down. And I'm taking this in slow motion, but this is in a matter of 3 seconds. And the last time he turns his head, looks at me, and has just the stare. And at that same point, you see his arm reaching down towards underneath the seat, and his right hand moving with both arms now coming together. And now I'm like, oh my God, he's got a gun. And as he starts reaching up towards the window towards me. I hear a what I believe is a shotgun, and feel pressure on my ballistic shield, which actually throws me backwards onto the ground, and I land on to the ground with my shield on top of me.
So pressure by that you
During
mean
that time,
like your shield has been struck, like
I believe I
you've been
believe I
shot.
was
Yeah.
shot, and I returned fire. I thought I was able to get off one gunshot at the time, but I fired twice into the vehicle at quadrant. And as I'm falling backwards, I hear more gunfire, which my partner behind me fired his rifle.
So lots of people that are involved in these situations, they have what's called auditory blockage or other physiologic phenomena happen to them where like time slows down, they can't hear anything that's being said and things. Did you experience any of that?
Absolutely. With the time slowing down and the tunnel vision that you hear about, all that occurred. Even going up to the car, later on, we know that the sirens in the vehicles were blaring in both squad cars and numerous other squad cars. I didn't hear any sirens at all. Didn't smell the smoke. I could see the smoke. And my tunnel vision was so I could see Quadrant's face and his eyes just staring at me and just looking at his face. And like I said, I think this happened in literally 5 seconds reviewing some of the videos, and it felt
Felt
like
like
minutes.
forever, right? Yeah.
It did. And
So
everything was going in slow motion
so
when it
Quadrant
actually was
Wilson,
happening.
was he struck by gunfire? Was he struck at
He
all?
was. He was he was struck by when my partner fired his rifle, a bullet fragmented off the B pillar of the vehicle as it was entering, and he was struck in the lower back with some shrapnel.
Okay.
Um,
Non-fatally though, he survived. Okay. And long after this happened and, there was a full investigation, did it turn out did you ever figure out what it was that struck your shield or any of that? Were any of those details ever figured out in the investigation?
Yeah, after we got discovery, the attorneys and experts, we kind of figured out what happened. And um,
That's a tool,
the
that's an extra
individual with the
tool that you
Halligan
could
tool,
use. Yeah.
right, struck the window and it actually got stuck into the seam. It never broke, but it actually slid down the window, the point, and got stuck in between the window and the seal at the bottom of the window. And what we believe is he was not able to pull that out, and he actually struck up on the Halligan. And when the Halligan came loose, the Halligan is actually what hit my shield,
Mm,
and that's the pressure I felt.
I see, I see, and that would have felt a lot like a projectile striking the shield and the sound too. I
I
mean, it
would
would sound like a projectile striking your shield. Alright, so this incident happens, and then at some point thereafter, you find out that you're being charged with a crime relating to this incident, is that right?
Correct. I was on administrative leave with pay for approximately 8 months. Investigation with the was extremely slow, and 8 months later, after protests and individuals calling for my charging, the district attorney decided to bring criminal charges against me.
First of all, what county was this that you were charged? What district attorney was the
It
jurisdiction where
was
you
Dane County in Madison is the county we were in for this arrest operation, and that district attorney decided for charges against me.
but before I get into the impact that that had on you, personally and professionally and on your family, do you think that your charges were the fact that you were charged was a product of, media accounts of the incident that were inaccurate, that were incendiary, or that, members of the community, their reaction put pressure on the district attorney?
It was I think it was all influenced from outside factors, from the media to community organizers to Black Panthers that would actually go in and have conversations with the district attorney instead of actually just putting out the facts of exactly and explaining the facts of exactly what happened that day. I think they took an easy way out and said to appease the community, we'll just charge this guy and, no big deal. Nothing will, we'll
So
charge him and let somebody else decide because we don't want to make the decision.
in many of our cases, that is the case where the prosecutors kind of throw their hands up and say, well, politically, I can't really survive. I'm going to have too much pressure on me if I don't charge the law enforcement officer. I don't think I'm going to get a conviction because the evidence isn't there, but basically, I'm going to do it anyway. And unfortunately, I see that in a lot of our cases, including in yours. The prosecutor kind of throws their hands up and says, "No big deal." And I think you're right. I think they do say that, but it was not. It was not a no big deal situation for you and for your family. What was the impact
Correct.
on you and your family when this happened?
You know, they don't realize when I say they, the district attorneys or other political figures, what actually occurs to not only myself, my family, my partner, and law enforcement throughout the state when you actually charge a law enforcement agent, which I believe is frivolous, and how that affects the entire community. For myself personally, I would have been first of all, I would have been bankrupt. I couldn't get a good defense. I couldn't get any defense without spending the money.
And these cases cost a lot. I mean, just so for our listeners to understand that when you're charged with a serious crime like this, whether you're a law enforcement officer or not, but obviously you're a law enforcement officer, this is something that happened in the course of your duties as a law enforcement officer. I mean, that kind of defense, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? I mean, is that ballpark what you think it would cost?
Over easily over a $500,000, approaching $1 million in costs. It's just insane.
So eventually, after all of this, where you're worried about how you're going to pay the bills and your family and what's going to happen if you have to go to prison, you have your day in court. What happens?
It was actually a relief finally. So after I was charged, it was about a year, and all the effects of what happened with the family and my kids and my partner who was still on administrative leave, the depression, the not knowing. When I finally was able to get to court and get the truth out there into the public, it was almost a relief off me. And the first day of trial, the prosecutors gave their opening statements, or defense gave my opening statements. And even in the opening statements, it was more of a justification of why my actions were justified. But until everybody started taking a stand, and actually, there was a couple things during the trial that were amazing. The district attorney tried asking individuals, do you just go up to shoot people in the back? And he would ask the witnesses, this other law enforcement. Of course not. No, we don't do that. And my defense attorney then said, if you were in Mark Wagner's position right now with the wheels spinning and him reaching and him coming up, what would you do? And every law enforcement officer that took the stand for the prosecution said, I would use deadly force. I would eliminate the threat. That is how we're trained. And I wish more prosecutors, more political figures know exactly how we're trained and not um, try to change the laws that are given to us to protect us. They try to change those laws, not through legislation, but through charging officers.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, I think they do know in most cases. They just choose to consciously disregard it for political reasons. Okay, so eventually your trial concludes. How long was the trial?
4 days,
Okay.
just a little bit less than a week.
What's that like? You sit there for 4 days with your life on the line, your freedom, everything you've built over your whole honorable service, everything you built is on the line.
Like I said, it was stressful, but it was a relief with all the information we were finally able to get out. And then I was just praying that the jury would understand. Um, that they would see exactly what happened with every fact that came out. And for me, the trial was more of a relief than actually stress because the truth, I still knew I did nothing wrong, and I just wanted to get those facts out.
I've heard that over and over again from so many of the officers that we work with at LELDF that they are looking forward to their trial, much more so than I ever, my own police career dealing with criminal defendants who were not looking forward to their trial. They wanted to put it off as long as possible. But the officers is like, they know they did the right thing. They're just waiting for the chance to actually say it because, you're not allowed, your lawyers will tell you don't really say anything before trial. You're not really allowed to
Correct.
make any comments or anything like that. So you kind of feel like the only narrative out there is what the news is saying, and you
Right.
want to tell your story, which you did.
And just before the trial, the district attorney came up to the attorneys and asked if I wanted to take a plea deal and say that, if I'm a good boy for a year, um, they'll make sure it's a misdemeanor after a year of good behavior. And I told them under no circumstance am I taking a plea deal. It's not rolling the dice. I'm not only want the facts out there for myself. This would have affected all law enforcement in the state of Wisconsin if any plea would have been made, if any
People get
charges
bullied.
would have
Yeah,
stuck.
you get bullied into taking a plea. Yeah, they do that a lot. I mean, I'm privileged to be able to kind of see inside of so many of these cases, and a lot of them there are last minute plea offers, and almost uniformly, um, law enforcement officers reject them because they know they're right, and they're not going to settle. These aren't, people who are accustomed to being a criminal defendant might be willing to take a plea deal, but for a law enforcement officer, that's not who they are. They're not accepting, something less than what they know is true. So you pled not guilty. You took a trial. You had a 4-day trial. How
Yep.
long did the jury deliberate, roughly?
They went over lunch. It was a little bit over an hour. We found out later that they ate their lunch. They had a vote right before lunch, and the foreman pretty much said, "Does anybody in this room think this guy's guilty?" And everybody was not guilty at that time. They ate their lunch, voted again, and came back with a not guilty verdict unanimously.
You're not guilty, completely acquitted, exonerated,
Correct.
did nothing wrong. And then how did that feel? I mean, that's got to be like the ultimate relief, right?
It was a great relief. Um, there's video of me in court, and I'm stone faced because I just don't want to show any emotion. But it was a huge relief.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And finally, relief for your family and your friends and colleagues. How does it feel out there now? You're still in the law enforcement profession. You're still in contact with people who are doing it day in and day out. Has anything
Correct.
changed? Do cops like? I think it's fair to say we're in a different place now. About 10 years ago when we started to see this proliferation of police officers being charged with crimes. Is anything different? Are cops the same as they were before?
It is different. They're approaching their job differently, which is not in a good way because cops are going to get hurt and killed. I came back because I wanted to not just serve the community, but I came back to try to institute some type of change and show other law enforcement that you have to do your job. You have to go home at night. You have to follow the rules that are given to you, and you can't be worried about what's going to happen if that decision is wrong in that, or if you make a mistake in that split second on what those consequences might be. Follow all your training, absolutely. And I don't know if I'm going to keep trying to change and keep trying to help other law enforcement out. I'm hoping for some type of change here, but every time you think there's a glimmer of hope that things are going to get better for law enforcement, something else occurs. And it's just beating the occupation down. Recruitment is at an all-time low, and we need good cops out there. Uh, we need great cops out there to serve our community.
Mark, thank you so much for joining us on Holding the Line. And also, I just want to tell you how privileged we feel at LELDF to have been able to support you and your family through this. And now that you've been completely exonerated, you can truly move on without the devastating impact that would be there financially for you. So,
Absolutely, and I appreciate everything you and LELDF has done for not only myself, but the notes from all your donors that were given to my wife. She read every single one of them. It meant a lot, more than we can ever say or give back.
well, thanks, Mark, for saying that. And I'm so glad that helped. And thanks again for joining us.
Thanks again for joining us for this episode of Holding the Line, a podcast by the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund. Please subscribe on our Substack where you could find more content from the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund. Add us on your favorite podcast provider. We appreciate all the support and the emails we've gotten so far. Keep them coming. Thanks again.